The bread was so full of large black-headed maggots that they had to be knocked out before eating, wrote surgeon John Atkins in his 1735 treatise on naval hygiene. In the damp, wooden belly of an 18th century frigate, the sailor's greatest enemy was not the cannonball, but the microscopic conqueror, decay. Yet, amidst this relentless rot, mariners engineered brilliant chemical defenses. Tonight, we open the quartermaster's ledger to reveal 3 lost techniques used to hold corruption at bay. To understand the magnitude of this challenge, we must first understand the environment of the wooden world, a contemporary term describing the self-contained ecosystem of a ship at sea. A vessel of the line was a floating city with no hinterland, severed from the Earth's resources for months at a time. Within the hull, the environment was aggressively hostile to organic matter. The bilge, a reservoir of stagnant water at the ship's lowest point, produced a perpetual, humid miasma that permeated the oak timbers. This dampness was the permeator, an invisible force that sought to hydrate, and therefore spoil, every dry store on board. The logistical equation facing the Victualling Board in London or the harbor masters in Cadiz was unforgiving. A sailor hauling heavy canvas in a gale required upwards of 4,000 calories a day to function. Fresh produce would vanish within a week. Livestock was difficult to keep alive and occupied valuable space. The crew, therefore, relied entirely on dead stores, matter that had been arrested in time. The preservationist's goal was to halt the biological clock of the food, preventing the proliferation of mold and rot in conditions that swung from the freezing gales of the North Atlantic to the sweltering humidity of the tropics. Failure in this preservation did not merely mean bad taste, it meant a caloric deficit that led directly to weakness, disease, and the collapse of the ship's discipline. The survival of the ship depended not on the captain's charts, but on the cooper's seal. Our examination of the Victualling Board's records reveals that the primary line of defense against starvation was the preservation of protein through the aggressive application of chemistry. This was not a simple matter of sprinkling salt over meat. The technique known as double salting was a rigorous industrial process detailed in the 1750 instructions for the commissioners of the Victualling. The process began immediately after slaughter. The beef, stripped of all fat and marrow, which the board noted were the seeds of rancidity, was cut into 4-pound pieces. These pieces were not immediately packed. Instead, they underwent a preliminary friction rubbing with white salt, a labor-intensive task performed by hand to break the surface fibers and draw out the blood. According to the manuals of the Deptford yards, the meat was then loosely stacked to drain for 24 hours. This drainage was critical. Blood was viewed as a corrupting agent that would spoil the brine. Only then did the true preservation begin. The meat was packed into tierces, casks holding roughly 300 pounds. The packer worked with the precision of a mason, layering beef and salt in alternating strata. However, the decisive step was the addition of the strong pickle. This was a saturated solution of boiled water and salt, tested by a specific density metric. The solution had to be buoyant enough to float a fresh egg. The cask was filled to the brim, headed up by the cooper, and left to stand. But the resourcefulness lay in the follow-through. Weeks later, the casks were opened, the spent bloody brine drained, and the meat repacked with fresh, dry salt, and a new, stronger pickle. This double salting created a hypertonic environment where bacteria simply could not survive, calcifying the beef into a mahogany-hard slab that required hours of soaking in fresh water to become edible again. While the beef relied on chemical suspension, the sailor's bread relied on physical desiccation. The ship's biscuit was a triumph of subtraction. The etymology itself, from the French biscuit, meaning twice cooked, hints at the methodology, though naval bakers often exceeded this definition. The recipe, as recorded in the baker's manifests from Portsmouth, was deceptively simple. Fine wheat flour and water. No yeast, no salt, and absolutely no butter were permitted, as fats were invitations to spoilage. The dough was kneaded into a stiff, dry paste, often requiring a break, a lever-operated beam, to force the water into the flour matrix, as it was too tough for human hands alone. Once shaped into flat discs, the biscuits entered the oven. The first baking cooked the flour. The second phase, however, was the preservation step. The biscuits were returned to a cooling oven, a kiln-like environment where they sat for hours. This drove out the last microscopic vestiges of moisture. The result was a dense, vitrified disc that was nearly impervious to the ambient humidity of the hold. A properly fired biscuit was so hard it could not be bitten. It had to be smashed with a marline spike or soaked in stew. This hardness was not a culinary failure, but a preservationist feature. It was a carbohydrate brick designed to endure for years. Finally, we turn to the Georgian era's most sophisticated innovation: portable soup. As voyages extended into the Pacific under commanders like Cook, the need for accessible nutrients, particularly for the sick berth, became acute. The solution, described in Sir John Pringle's medical discourses, was essentially a dehydration reduction that anticipated the modern bouillon cube by 2 centuries. The process was arduous. It began with the boiling of cattle legs, shins, and offal, parts rich in collagen. This stock was boiled continuously for hours, skimmed of all fat, and then strained. The liquid was then moved to smaller, shallow copper pans for a secondary, gentle reduction. The goal was to evaporate the water without burning the gelatin. As the moisture left, the liquid turned into a thick, glue-like syrup. This syrup was poured into cooling molds. Once set into a rubbery jelly, the cakes were turned out onto flannel and dried in the sun or a warm room, turned frequently like cheese. The final product was a translucent, rock-hard slab of protein glue. It looked like a piece of amber varnish, but it contained the concentrated caloric essence of the beef. To use it, the cook merely dissolved a piece in boiling water. This portable soup was a masterpiece of volume reduction, allowing a ship to carry thousands of meals in a single chest, impervious to rot as long as it was kept dry. When we analyze these techniques, the calcified beef, the vitrified biscuit, the amber slab of soup, we see something far more profound than simple cooking. We are witnessing a physical manifestation of human foresight. In the face of the ocean's vast indifference, where entropy and decay are the natural order, these sailors refused to yield. They understood that survival was not a matter of luck, but of preparation. This preservation was an act of defiance against time itself. By investing immense labor up front, the friction rubbing of the salt, the triple firing of the kiln, the endless boiling of the stock, they were effectively banking energy for a future moment of need. It is a principle that resonates deeply with our modern condition. Whether we are canning vegetables from a summer garden, stocking a pantry against an uncertain winter, or simply saving resources for a rainy day, we are engaging in the same fundamental exercise. We are building a buffer between ourselves and the chaos of the world. The wooden world of the ship is a microcosm of our own lives. We cannot control the storms that rise on the horizon, but through resourcefulness and the discipline of preservation, we can ensure that we have the strength to weather them. This is the true legacy of the Victualling Board. The knowledge that while we cannot stop the clock, we can, with enough salt and foresight, hold the decay at bay. The preservation of this knowledge relies on the stewardship of our patrons. If you value this archive of practical history, consider supporting us on Patreon to help us document the next chapter. To the problem solvers watching, do you practice the art of preservation? Whether it is canning, curing, or dehydrating, share your methods in the comments below. We wish to know how you keep the corruption at bay. Until the next entry, keep the lamp lit